Okay, first question.
Okay, as a survivor of Superstorm, not merely a hurricane, it was conflated with a nor'easter, Sandy, from Mahopac, New York, Amina. We had nothing for a week, nothing. No cell phone, the batteries died in the towers. No water, our well pump ran on electric. No heat, we had a tank of oil, needs a spark to start. So been there, done that for a week. No water, no nothing. Having also read that the greatest damage in the 1906 San Francisco earthquake was from fire. Third factor, we a few months ago had a blackout in Berkeley and everybody was lighting candles. Okay, so where are they going to turn off the gas? This is the question. This is what terrifies me, is the issue of gas. I've got bottles of water all over the house and a freezer full of food and so forth, and a couple of go bags for each entrance. What terrifies me is is turning off the gas. We have a gas shutoff valve at our house, and we had them put in when we bought our house, which is retrofitted. We had gas shutoff valves put in the 2 adjoining houses. But what about the gas still flowing through the street? I don't really trust PG&E after San Bruno. So, and this isn't just Amina, I'm looking at you, but it's not just directed to Amina. And somebody, you know, there's no power, the sun sets, and all our neighbors light candles. We're toast. What is the status of the gas shutoff? Both in the, you know, in the neighborhoods, but in the macro, the big lines, because this is big trouble.
So, I mean, I can try to answer that. I don't know this. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I don't know the status in the city of Berkeley, so I work for the campus. So we do have our facility services, and part of their checklist after emergencies is to check that for the campus. Now, for the city of Berkeley and PG&E, I know that they are very committed to emergency response and their role. Do I know particularly what they do per neighborhood? I don't know that.
I can add some. I can add that the USGS is just going to produce or release a study called Haywire about a scenario earthquake on the Hayward earthquake, a magnitude 7.2. And they're anticipating about 600 fire ignitions throughout the East Bay, which will exhaust the fire department capabilities. They're now studying whether or not that's a realistic assessment, because as you can imagine, it's very hard to do. But it just shows that the problem that you're describing is a very real one.
So I can add that I was at a meeting of the NAURUC, which is the National something Utility Commissioners. And I was on a panel, and one of the other panelists was the person in charge of the gas system at PG&E. So as another PG&E customer, I was very interested to hear that they have a stupendously modern gas control center in San Ramon with amazing, I haven't had a chance to visit yet, amazing control and overview and everything. And my understanding from him is, in principle, there are lots of valves in the system that they could use to shut things off. And that's not going to stop in your particular little piece of the system. It's not going to stop the remainder from getting out if there are gas breaks. But he didn't talk about what the plans are to do if there's an earthquake with all of their automatic capability. So ask what PG&E.
I'll just mention very quickly what you're seeing and behind your panelists right now is another live display. This is something that we developed out of the lab that is giving you a signal directly out of Peggy's lab at the Seismology lab here at Berkeley. This is a display that's basically triggered by signals coming out, the z-axis velocity of the seismometer buried in the Hayward Fault. That's just a few hundred yards from here.
For the person from the seismology lab, is there any interest in connecting your early warning system to the signs that we see above the freeways that warn us of child abduction, and also toll plazas and stopping people from going across the bridge before the earthquakes?
So the answer is that we've been working on the technical implementation of the earthquake early warning system to show that it's possible. That was the demonstration system. And we started reaching out 3 years ago or more to people who could use the warnings so they can give us feedback on what makes it useful to them, and asking them how they would use warnings like that. So that's a Caltrans thing, those boards up there, although the messages aren't always Caltrans messages. And we're talking to Caltrans to a certain extent. You know, I can decide what I'm going to do in the earthquake. To a certain extent, we have to rely on them to make reasonable decisions about it. There's no reason it couldn't happen.
Hi, this question for the Temblor and Dr. Stein. I was just kind of curious about the payout number. So for policyholders that have 15% deductible, I think the payout was like 1 in 6 or 1 in 5. Just kind of curious, is that because policyholders fall into an exception, or just the system's overwhelmed and payouts just don't happen? I was just kind of curious about that.
So you're thinking that payout chance sounds low to you? Is that what you're suggesting?
Yeah.
That's interesting. Obviously, if the payout was 1-to-1, you couldn't have insurance. So what we do is we know where you are, so we know the full likelihood of getting whacked by earthquakes. We know something about your home and its vulnerabilities. And from that, we can calculate the amount of losses that you would have. And then when we compare that to a 15% deductible, we can calculate your chance of getting some money back from that. Now, this calculation does not include the fact that you've been making premiums. So it doesn't mean that there's a net gain. It just means that there's some payment coming to you as a result of that earthquake. So the numbers that we see in California are maybe as high as 1 chance in 5 to maybe as low as 1 chance in 50. That's the range. But you know, you can't have insurance if everybody's going to get a full payment back. So the question is, does this look to you like something that you want to protect yourself, or is there a better way to protect yourself, is what we're trying to do. We're not telling you you should or you shouldn't insure. We're saying you need to know what these chances are so you can make a good decision.
Hi. It seems like the most important aspect of all of this is awareness and concern and preparation. It seems like the most important target for that statewide would be our public schools. I wonder if any of you know what efforts are being made, if any, to develop a statewide program through the Office of Superintendent of Education or whatever, a statewide program for education in our public schools, so that at least our younger citizens have the awareness early on that they need to think about these things and be prepared and take steps to protect themselves and their families.
So there are a number of things. One was that after the 1933 earthquake in Long Beach, there was a law put in place that said schools have to be earthquake safe. I don't know the details of that. You might know more. I know that the state architects tasked with making sure that the buildings of public schools in the state are earthquake safe. He's a member of the Seismic Safety Commission that I'm serving on right now. The city of San Francisco has mandated retrofit and safety for their public schools, and I think has now also mandated that private schools upgrade their facilities also to ensure the students will be safe.
It's an evaluation.
Yeah.
Okay. But they have to document the problems. Document the problems is always a very important first step.
It's a self-evaluation, too.
A law was recently proposed by the senator from Napa to require that schools document what the earthquake hazards within their school buildings are. So in the Napa earthquake and in many of the recent earthquakes in California, there was damage because the ceiling tiles fell, or the shelves fell over, or the television fell off the top shelf. And we were very lucky because the earthquakes happened at 3:30 in the morning on Sunday or on Martin Luther King Day, so that in fact children weren't affected. But the senator has a proposal that requires the schools to document these problems, and that's always the first step to alleviating them.
So making our public infrastructure safer is important. What I'm talking about is education. Mm-hmm. Is education about the risk and the necessity to prepare for these kinds of hazards.
Yes, so the survey, SCEC, the California Office of Emergency Services have been working. They originally developed the Shakeout Module. Shakeout always happens on October
16th.
X. Yeah. No, well, it's October X at 10X. 10X at 10X. And that day, I think, is always a Thursday in October, which is long enough after the beginning of the school year that teachers can have started to inform the students, but that the students will have been versed enough that they can drop, cover, and hold on. I think we've all found that teaching the parents through their kids is a very important multiplier effect. And I think that actually the schools do that. I can tell you that when my kids were in school, we kept getting this information about what we had to do so that we could all be safer and make our plan and this. And it depends on how naggy the kids are.
This does raise a great question, which we can bring up with the state and with the lieutenant governor, which is, to what degree is that mandated, and what degree is it carried out in all schools? Because I think it's certainly true in certain schools, but it can be done in all schools. And what other techniques can be done besides drills that could help students prepare?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, drills great, but what I'm talking about is a much more robust educational program. And it seems like the expertise like that you have should be shared with our public officials in an effort to develop a real robust educational program in our schools statewide.
Pier has a K-12 educational program which is actually posted on our website, and we have done outreach primarily to fourth graders because they're at an age where they're beginning to understand and actually be curious about this phenomenon. And Peggy's right. We're able to have outreach through the families, primarily through the kids, because they bring this information home. So there has been a concerted effort to create educational modules that comply with core curriculum standards in the state. It's up to, though, it's not mandated, but because it hits the science and preparedness and natural disasters and just, there's a lot of different components that can feed into it that are extremely valuable. And so we've been able to do that outreach when funding is available to various fourth grade classes. I just got a call yesterday from a high school, and I said, "Where are you located?" And they said, "We're in the North County of Oklahoma." And these students, this was a senior, it's a class, it's a small school, but they're creating a video of what should they do, how should they prepare for an earthquake. And so it's very interesting that this is in Oklahoma. That might be due to induced, the potentially induced earthquakes. But this awareness coming from a part of the country that we typically don't expect to be have a high seismicity, they're coming to us. So we're able to provide them with some resources and with some information.
So Grace, one thing I'd like to suggest is that one of the problems, I think, from my perspective, is that a lot of the material is fairly dry, that you get a lot of this, and so students kind of tune out to it. I think what we're starting to see today is some of the really exciting new developments. I mean, I think Amina's video, the graphics that you're using, where you showed like superheroes and things, the cartoons, those are the kind of things I think that will really work to engage students. So I think that having that kind of material, livening it up. I mean, the one thing probably most of you saw San Andreas, the film. How many saw that? Actually, it did not do well in the box office. Although it was I actually thought it was a very, very good film. The Rock was in it, and it was so over the top, typical Hollywood. But the thing that was exciting was that I thought this will wake, this is going to be widely seen. People will really start paying attention now. And it didn't. It was the same, I think the same phenomenon we're up against, which is people, even that super highly produced, exciting Hollywood film, people don't want to go there. So what can we do that would reach out and really connect with people? One other thing I think is that if many of you have flown recently, airlines have finally waken up to the message they give at the beginning about how to put your seatbelt on and everything that nobody pays attention to. They've started making those very funny and like entertaining. And those are very smart. I mean, that tactic is great, because now I watch them on Virgin especially. They're like amazingly entertaining. So can we do that same kind of thing for earthquake preparedness? And I think, to take your point, that we're going to be recording today. We're going to try and sort of condense it down to 5 minutes or so, but we're going to post that. We'll share it with everyone who's here on YouTube and other places, so that it'll be a way of saying, here's some new ideas, some new things that you may not have thought about in this context, and hopefully, again, get people's attention.
So there's one more.
Amina?
A resource, sort of, is called totallyunprepared.org.
Totallyunprepared.org?
Yes.
Okay.
I recommend enjoying it.
Excellent. Okay, totallyunprepared.org. We'll add that to our materials. Amina?
I just wanted to say that I think your point is well taken, is that we need to start young and educating people so that preparedness becomes ingrained, and it's not something that we're trying to change behavior. It becomes part of who you are. You have an earthquake kit because you live in a place that has earthquakes, or you have other hazards you're exposed to. You have a way to mitigate against those. Because working with college students, we're up against a lot to get them to get prepared, because it hasn't been ingrained in them. And when we ask them, how do we make this real for you, they say, we don't care. So there's no way. Most of them are like, tell us how to survive. We focus on urban survivalism, and they say, how can we make this more interesting? It's like, tell us how to survive classes. Don't tell us how to survive an earthquake. And so it is really challenging. But if they, like in Japan, I know it's definitely more ingrained in their culture of preparedness, and I think that's definitely where we, that's our dream goal, is to get to that point where you grow up in earthquake country and you're prepared, and it's just part of what you do.
Great. Let me jump in with one quick question for Bob. Bob, you mentioned the inspiration from biology and in the locomotion aspect of being able to gain access. Are there efforts underway to also address maybe the sensing part from biology? As you mentioned, dogs are very good. They have a very good sense of smell or perception. And I would imagine insects like cockroaches do as well. Is that an analogous approach being studied?
That's sort of one of the next steps to the robot that I showed, so that there aren't sensors on that yet. And in fact, the lead author, my former PhD student, who's now at Harvard doing a postdoc, is looking at just that. So there are a whole wide range of sensors that are possible to add that can give information that's relatively unique quickly, where we don't have sensors with those capabilities at the moment.
Great. Yes.
That's on. Okay. My question actually followed along with what he said about education and what you mentioned, and has this particular program been taped so that the program in entirety could be put on YouTube? We have a system where we try and let people know what's going on, and we could put it out on Nextdoor and refer people to see it so they could see it in segments or as they went along. Going along with that for interesting alerts, I really appreciated. I'm sorry, I don't have your name quickly. In the center, yeah, for Berkeley, for the comedic graphics. If you have a source for that, getting people just to read the first line of a message to alert them to it would be really helpful. And I probably have about 5 other questions.
Can you? Which organization are you from? You said.
Oh, well, I'm from an organization with a terrible name called CERP.
Oh yes,
it's CERPP. It was originated in 2006, Citizens for Emergency Response and Preparedness program. And we were lucky enough to have the Temblor people come and speak to us. Volkan spoke to us, and people put it on their thing. But getting people to come to a group like that is a chore. Everybody's worked. They, don't want to go to another meeting. So if we can put things out on Nextdoor or other things, and bit by bit refer people to them. One other thing is there might be, to organize people, because we've started this calendar, a California calendar. So in January, you could fill your water tanks, whatever you have. In February, you make sure you have food, and so on.
Great. By the way, all those resources are extremely valuable, so please email them to us, and we'll collect them and post them. I mean, just the ones you mentioned, and I'll also ask the panelists who are comfortable with sharing their slides. We'll post those as well. SERP.org. Okay. CERPP.org. Terrific. Thank you. Question in the middle.
This is also a question about awareness, but maybe at the economic level of things. I'm coming from the point of view of a relatively recent Berkeley home purchaser. We have a great view, and we probably score really well on Professor Stein's scoring mechanism. Nonetheless, I don't think we received the appropriate discount in our price for suffering this continuing hazard. To what extent do say, steely-eyed market realists incorporate this kind of hazard, let's start with seismic hazard in California, into the pricing mechanism? Or is the objective market as much denial as we are as individuals?
The short answer is zero. It's really astonishing. I just had my home refinanced, and accredited California appraiser came to my home, and I said, would you like to know if I've been retrofit? And he said, no. I said, what do you mean, no? He said, it has no value, no bearing on the value of your home. Volkan and I recently talked to one of the top real estate agents in California, and he had just sold a home in Pacifica on the San Andreas on the edge of a landslide. And I said, well, were there any environmental issues with the sale of this home? He said, yeah, fog. I said, did this affect the market appeal of this home? He said, we had 8 offers over asking, sold for $125,000 over asking. So what we have here is a collusion of disinformation. Real estate agents, and if there are any in the room, I'm sorry, do not want this word spoken in association with any sale of any kind. And therefore, the pact of disbelieving is held between the agent and the client. And yes, you do sign, when you sign your name 140 times to get the loan and whatnot, you will sign a home disclosure report that says you know that you're near a fault, et cetera. But this happens at the end of the road. And so the goal of Temblor is you can see this while you're looking. In fact, we have a version of this, we haven't released it yet, that runs inside of Zillow or Redfin or Realtor.com. So when you're looking for a home, you'll see this every time you hit on a home. Because it really is going to depend on you, not the agent, to see this and to decide what you can do.
I know that the city of Berkeley actually has a policy where they will allow the they will hold the transfer tax in escrow, but that the new homeowner can use that to retrofit their homes. So there is, at least in the city of Berkeley, some financial incentive to be aware of that and to take action.
Last summer, the New Yorker had the terrifying article about the Cascadia fault. I wonder if any of you would care to comment on that.
She wrote a follow-up article 2 weeks later. I think she had received such a public outpouring. It was great, great article.
I think it's quite accurate.
Everything west of
well
I-5 would be
researched.
wiped out.
The threat is real. It's interesting, though, that the probabilistic seismic hazard, the likelihood of strong shaking, is greater here than it is in Seattle or British Columbia. So while that threat is real, we should deal with what we have right here at home first.
But that article also raised the awareness, and part of the reason that there was a Resilience White House event last week is because the people in the White House read that article.
It's a quick question for Ross. Really enjoyed your concept of bringing it down to home, to your own personal property. But I live in Portola Valley, 1,000 feet from the San Andreas Fault, up in the hills. And after the Loma Prieta earthquake. We had about $5 worth of damage. The house directly behind me had $100,000 worth of damage. I mean, literally 200 feet behind me. And I was wondering if there is any future possibility of actually modeling the geometry of your house and the slope that it's on to refine the estimate of whether or not the house is going to get damaged.
It's a great question, and we'd love to do that. And in fact, we should be able to do that. We know the slopes from the digital elevation model, and a home that's on a slope has a greater problem in terms of earthquake shaking than one that's on flat ground, because it vibrates differently where the building is tall versus where the building is short. So in additional features of your home like this do clearly matter, and we're only capturing average resilience. We also want to create tools in which you would say, wait a minute, maybe I should be talking to a structural engineer. There's one in the room here. Maybe I should talk to at least a home inspector to crawl under my house and look at my foundation and make sure it's okay. There are steps a person can take, and we hope that Temblor is the beginning of that process, not the end of it.
So the Temblor is a great start with that, you know, in understanding the environment of your home. But we do have the capability, the structural engineering community, the practicing structural engineering community has the ability to model homes and to understand how they will behave with slopes and knowing the type of construction you have. So my advice would be to contact a structural engineer and to talk to them about that possibility.
So this question is for Dan in QuakeFinder. I'm just curious with the data that you have so for every earthquake that's happened, well, for all of the earthquakes that have happened that you have data on, what percentage of those have clear indicators that would give you a warning 2 weeks ahead of time or a day ahead of time? And how many false positives would you have out of, you know, how often those indicators actually flare up?
We're working on that now. So this time next year, we hope to have our full statistical database. So we've had a number of runs at developing algorithms that tease these electromagnetic signals out of what is a lot of noise. I didn't mention it in a presentation, but these magnetometers are extremely sensitive. They pick up everything, cars driving by, people walking by, anything metal. We had a tire swing near one of our magnetometers, and because it has metal in it, we saw this cyclical motion in our data. And we're like, what in the world? And we had one of our guys go up there and take pictures. We couldn't figure it out until we saw the tire swing. So there's a lot of noise in the data. And again, there's signal processing techniques now that if you know what you're looking for, you can tease that out, and that's exactly where we are in the program now. As a matter of fact, I'll put out a call. We're at Berkeley if we're looking for good signal processing students, and we offer internships, so it would be great if we could get the best and the brightest. But this time next year, it's our goal by the end of 2016 to have, with 2 algorithms that we partnered with NASA on a crowdsourcing campaign. It was a 2-week marathon, a small cash prize. There were 300 people that registered for it, 60 that competed. The object was to develop an algorithm based on a subset of our data that we had provided to the agency to forecast an earthquake that's hidden in it. 90 days of data at a time. There was control data. It was all statistically done. An independent researcher at Harvard helped develop the competition, helped grade the algorithms that were submitted and tested. 2 algorithms popped out of that we've now taken delivery of and that we're going to be developing over this year. We have a letter from Harvard saying that there's clear predictive power in our magnetometer data. So I would venture to guess that we'll show, and we have shown, that we do see these signals. There is some pattern. We suspect our first public discussion of this will be, there'll be a high false positive rate, but with all algorithms, they'll improve with the more earthquakes we get too. So we don't want to oversell, but we're very confident that there's something there. I hope I answered your question.
Ray, we have time for one more? Yes.
Hi, my name's Craig Justice. I'm actually in the insurance business, and that is a big part of earthquake preparation, at least from my perspective. And I know Dr. Stein and Vulcan, nice to see you guys. But actually, the question I have is for Dr. Stein and also the gentleman from Portola Valley, because one of the one of the things that we hear in our business, and it's alarming to know that after Northridge struck, about 40% of residents bought earthquake insurance. And now, for a variety of reasons, market estimates are 10-ish or so percent. So people have sort of gone away from buying earthquake insurance for a variety of reasons. And one of the things we hear is sort of the short memory or the notion that I've been around, my house has been in California for 30 years, never had a problem, type of thing. And so for the gentleman in Portola Valley, the question I have for him is, do you feel some sort of sense of security because of what you observed with Loma Prieta, and that the house behind you had all this damage and yours is sort of, do you have any type of fortress mentality that your house will never be damaged and therefore don't have to worry about anything? So that's for you. And then beyond that, for Dr. Stein, regardless of retrofitting, if there's a big enough earthquake, what's the potential for damage? Even with some of your estimates, that show the likelihood of certain damage, but is his fortress in Portola Valley really going to stand up to a big one? And so those are sort of the two questions. Maybe
okay.
First for
let me address, because we only have 30 seconds left. So I'm going to give it to Ross to answer that one.
Craig, it's a great question. And what Temblor should do is not just tell you the likelihood of an earthquake, but also tell you what's your likely damage in what we might say your worst case earthquake is. I think people need both of those to make a good decision. And in the case of Portola Valley, we know it's obviously a magnitude 7 or larger earthquake on the San Andreas. We should do that.
Thank you. Okay, so the fact that you're all here today, that you came out, took time out of your busy schedules, shows that you're not the kind of target audience we're worried about. We're worried about everybody else. So please, thank you all. Please tell your friends, tell your family, share this information. Thank you, panelists, for doing a fantastic job.